So let's talk about the firewall first, the basic fundamental of firewall. Okay, so can anybody tell me like what is firewall actually is, if you know anything about the firewall? What is firewall, why the firewall is there, and how it works in the real world, the basic things of the firewall? Any idea? Anything like what is the firewall, the basic fundamental of firewall, whatever you have in your mind, you can share here.
We can write policies, or we can shape out traffics to block something, or we can use the encryption, decryption, the packets. For these things, we can use firewall.
Yes, these are the policies basically we can configure on the follow any firewall, okay, on any firewall. But what is the firewall? Why the firewall is there in the market? If you talk about a router, right? If you talk about a router, the router is already there. We can configure the netting, we can configure the static route, right? I like after netting and after configuration of the route, default route, static route, or maybe dynamic routing, your LAN traffic can easily move to the internet, right? So why firewall is required here? If we talk about the configuration part, like the basic configuration we can put on the router, and
To
after that your
inspect
LAN
our
traffic.
packet,
Yep, tell me.
like to inspect our packets, uh, or they will monitor what type of behavior this traffic, like those.
Okay, yeah, that's the policy part we can configure here, right? We can inspect the traffic, LAN traffic, or the WAN traffic. It's up to us. We can configure that. So basically, the firewall is a layer 3 device, like such as your router, right? We can configure all the things where like router, जो router पे हम configure कर सकते हैं, we can configure the same things on the firewall also, like netting, static route, ACLs we can configure here. These basic things we can configure. The interface IP, like L3 configuration, SVI's configuration, we can done on the firewall also. Like all the things we can configure on the router, same thing we can configure on the firewall also. So firewall is a layer 3 device. But apart from that, जो चीज firewall को basically router से अलग करती है, वो उसकी advanced feature set है. Firewall is a layer 3 device similar to a router, but with advanced feature set to protect your local network. Okay, to protect your local network. Basically, it is meant to protect organizations' private network from public network. This is all your public network, right? Hacker sits on the public network, like you connect with any like internet connection with the broadband or maybe your mobile connection, but उस कनेक्शन के आगे जितना भी नेटवर्क है वो पब्लिक नेटवर्क है, एंड दैट इज हार्मफुल. वहां पे कोई भी हैकर भी हो सकता है, कोई मैलिशियस एप्लीकेशन भी आपके सिस्टम के अंदर डाल सकता है, लाइक इफ यू गूगल और टॉरेंट, वहां से आप कोई मूवी डाउनलोड करते हैं, तो मे बी यू कैन बी अ like victim of a cyber attack. So firewall sits between your private network and the public network. Okay, it protects your private network from the outer world. And how it can protect, like जैसे राउटर में हम बेसिक कॉन्फ़िगरेशन करते हैं, नेटिंग, ACLs, or static route, maybe dynamic route. अगर आपने सिर्फ यही कॉन्फ़िगरेशन करी है, you can easily reach to the route internet. Okay, perfect. So to reach to the internet, we need the basic configuration like netting, ACLs, routing. After implementing these configurations, we can easily reach to the internet. But apart from that, on the firewall, we can use the advanced feature set to protect our local network from the outside network. If you've done the basic configuration like netting, ACLs, and static routing, you can reach to the internet. But to protect your network, we have to configure some policies. We can configure some policies here to protect the network. Which policies we can configure here on the firewall? Any idea? Anything? Firewall sits between the public and private network, right? Which will be segregating both the networks, public and private, right? And restricting the public network to access the private network. Okay, it is restricting the public network to access the private network by configuring some security policies as per our requirement. It's up to us. We can configure any policy. We can inspect any traffic, whether the traffic is coming from inside to outside or the traffic is coming from the outside to inside. We can allow that outside traffic also. It's up to us. If the requirement is there, we can configure that policy. But if you talk about a router, in router, if you configure the basic thing like netting, ACLs, and static route, then after you can directly reach to the internet. But here on the firewall side, if you configure the basic thing and after that you configure the advanced feature sets such as the policies, you can inspect the incoming traffic. Firstly, the incoming traffic, because outside traffic is already blocked and you are just configured some policies from inside to outside. So at the time, your traffic can easily move to the internet. But before that, here on the firewall side, when the traffic is passing the firewall, it will inspect it by the firewall. And there is a session table is created on the firewall side. We'll talk about the session table, right? So there is a session table developed here on the firewall, and based on that, the return traffic, you can say, return traffic easily come inside. But if any request initiated outside, it cannot penetrate the firewall directly. If in case it's a router at the time that return or like the request which is coming from the outside to inside network, that request can be easily penetrate the router. In the router, like as you know, you configure the netting, routing, and you can easily access the internet directly, right? So I'm assuming you are familiar with the routing switching, right? All of you done the routing switching?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So the idea is clear why the firewall is fundamental is clear in your mind why the firewall is there. What is the basic use of the firewall here in the market, here in the network? All the requests can be like all the things can be done by the router also, but firewall is also a layer 3 device with advanced feature set. In the router, we cannot inspect the traffic. In the router, we cannot configure the security policies. In the router, if we have to configure the internet access, then there are basic things like netting, ACS, and the routing. After that, Your LAN traffic can easily reach to the internet, but that traffic cannot be inspected, right? That initiated traffic, which is coming from the inside, or maybe that return traffic, which is coming from the outside, cannot be inspected on the router. But firewall is there. If the firewall is there, means your initiated traffic, your inside traffic will be monitored, will be inspected, and also the return traffic. That return traffic also going to be inspected, right? Okay. And for that, we need to configure some security policies as per our requirement. We can like configure multiple security policies as per our requirement. We can check any traffic, whether the traffic is browser based, whether the traffic is application based, right? Whether the traffic is HTTP, HTTPS, we can inspect any traffic. We'll talk about all these things in later, like in deep, we'll take a deep dive in that topics in the later sessions. Okay. Let me know if you have any doubt. Yeah.
No, sir.
So this is the basic thing about the firewall. So today we are going to cover some of the topic of the firewall. The first one is we will cover uh, the EDU, basically the complete course. We'll talk about this, the EDU, the official course of the Palo Alto Firewall. What is firewall and types of firewall? Why to choose Palo Alto Firewall over the different firewall? Because there are multiple firewall available in the market, right? There are Cisco is there, Juniper is there, FortiGate is there, Checkpoint is there, like multiple firewalls are there. But why to choose the Palo Alto firewall over the different firewalls? And the last one is initial configuration. Okay, all right. Let me open the course first. Yeah, this is the official course of the Palo Alto Firewall, PCNSE, okay. EDU 210. And here is the module segment. So this is module 1 to module 16. This is the complete course. The module 1, like next generation security platform and architecture, will talk about all these things, like the architecture of the Palo Alto firewalls, right? The second is the virtual and cloud deployment. There are multiple types of deployment here in the Palo Alto firewall. We can deploy the firewall physically. We can deploy the virtual image of the Palo Alto firewall in any server. And the third option is also there, the cloud deployment. So we can opt for that. It's up to us. But mostly we can see, if you see in the like real time, we use the hardware version. But nowadays, like if you talk about today's scenario, so people are opting the VMs also. The initial configuration, the interface configuration, like in a router, if you talk about a router, so that interface can be a layer 3 or SVIs, right? Or maybe on a layer 3 switch, you can configure that interface in VLAN, like in layer 2. But here, there are like different modes. We can configure the interface as layer 3, layer 2, HA, vWire, the advanced topic, the vWire, and the tap mode. We'll talk about all the like port configuration. Then module from fifth point to up to 11th point. Security, net policy, app ID, content ID, URL filtering, decryption, wildfire, and user ID. These are the advanced feature set. By using these feature set, Palo Alto is called as the advanced firewall. Have you heard the term NGFW? Have you heard that this term NGFW?
Yes.
So Palo Alto is the first firewall which named as NGFW. NGFW stands for Next Generation Firewall. Because at like in early segment, if you talk about like uh, 2010 or before that, at the time, like the firewall is there, also already firewall is there, but those firewall can inspect the traffic up to layer 4 only, to layer 4 only. But when firewall comes in the picture, it can inspect the traffic up to layer 7. And one more thing, earlier we have to use multiple devices to like inspect all the traffic. For DNS, we have to use the DNS query. For app ID filtering, we have to use the app filter. Like multiple devices we have to use to filter the traffic completely. But Palo Alto comes with a single box. A single box, it combines all the feature set in a single box, like app ID, URL filtering, content filtering, for all the things. It bundled all the feature set in a single box. That's why it termed as the Palo Alto NGFW. The first time any firewall which termed as NGFW is the Palo Alto firewall. Okay. So from this point, from module 5 to module 11, using these modules, the Palo Alto is known as the NGFW. Still, if you talk about from last 4 years, Palo Alto is the market leader. There is a Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is open source organization. They basically done surveys on the network firewall servers on all the devices, on all the network devices basically. So they like produce the report quarterly or half yearly and yearly also. In that, from last 4 years, Palo Alto is one of the leader in the network firewall segment. Then we'll talk about this Global Protect. Global Protect is used when we are a roaming kind of employee and we use the remote access VPN. So at the time Global Protect we have to use. We'll talk about this and we'll do a lab on all the topics on all the modules. Then side to side VPNs. I think you already know about the VPNs, right? So we'll talk about, like, if you don't know anything from any module, we'll talk about from very scratch. If you like talk about the first module, NGFW or Palo Alto or Firewall. So we'll talk about from the very scratch. We'll start from the very scratch so that कि हम कोई topic skip ना करें. We'll start from the very scratch. Then the module 14, monitoring and reporting. Module 15, active passive high availability. And the last one is next generation security practices. So from module 1 to module 15, this is the complete course, the official course of the Palo Alto PCNSE. Okay, any doubt? Any queries? Now I think you are much aware what is firewall and their purpose, right? We talk about the fundamental why the firewall is required. And what is the use of firewall? It sits between your public network and private network and protect your private network from the public network, right? Your firewall is sitting between the public and the private network and securing your local infra from the outside world. It is creating a shield basically so that outside traffic cannot penetrate directly into the inside network. Maybe there are like legitimate servers who you have provided access for the local users, and you have placed the firewall here so that outside traffic cannot directly access that server. If any access is required, then we have to configure the policy for that. So that legitimate user, only the legitimate user can access the local network, not all the users from the outside network. Okay. So let's talk about types of firewall first. Any idea how much types of firewall are there? Anything?
Like application firewall, zone-based firewall.
Oh, zone-based firewall and
Application firewall.
yeah, that's good. But uh, if you talk about the firewall types of firewall, firstly, firewall divides into two parts. You you set the types of firewall, which is further divided parts of the firewalls. So let's talk about types of firewall first. If you talk about types of firewall, so basically there are two types of firewall. Only two types of firewall is there in the market. So first one is the system firewall. Okay, or you can easily name it as antivirus. Known as user and firewall. Okay. The second is network firewall. Infra security firewall. Any idea about system firewall, network firewall? Any difference between both of them? You can share anything, like if you have any word, you can share here. So the name is already written like system firewall antivirus, right? System firewalls are those firewalls which is used at user end in the local machine. We have to like purchase any antivirus. We have to install that antivirus in our system, and that antivirus should be updated with the latest patch, right? And how it protects our net, like our system. If you are connected with the internet with a broadband connection, and you already installed an antivirus in your system, like the legitimate, for that you have paid some amount, right? I'm not I'm not talking about that pirated one. Most of the users are using the pirated antivirus, but I'm talking about that legitimate antivirus, which is updated. You install that antivirus in your system, and you are connected with the internet, and you have like you have initiated a request from your system to one of the malicious site. Let's talk about Torrent. So you initiated the request and you access Torrent. Torrent is one of the worst sites on the internet. The risk level is 5 for BitTorrent. If we talk about the risk level, so it is on the high risk level. So On the like with torrent, you can like fetch anything. You can download the movies, you can download the games, latest movies, also there. uh, PDFs, the paid PDFs is also there, right? You can download. Most of the users don't know, because nothing is free on the internet. If something is free on the internet, maybe something went wrong can be happen with you. So if we talk about the torrent, like user access the torrent, he downloaded one movie from torrent, and that movie, that file which is downloaded in user system, that file which is downloaded in user system, that file is vulnerable. Maybe any kind of virus is attached with that file. User unknowingly download that virus also, because that user is downloading only the movie, right? Maybe MKV file or MP4 file is there. So user is downloading that movie only, that file only. But in the backend, hacker like attached one exe file with that, like user downloaded MP4 file, but in a short span, user attached one exe file here, executable file. Okay, you hacker attached one exe file, and your system is updated with the antivirus. Once that file is there in your system, antivirus is going to inspect that file which is downloaded, but because you can see that MP4 file only, but that antivirus can easily find the virus also. It is going to show you some recommendation, like you have downloaded some virus is there, you can clear that virus or you can allow that virus for this time. Have you seen this kind of information? If you have installed any antivirus in your system and you downloaded some kind of harmful applications, at the time antivirus is going to show you some recommendation to clear that file and that harmful file, right? Have you seen that kind of information in your system anytime?
Yes.
Yeah, whenever we install a new application or software.
Right. If that software is virus free at the time, firewall is not going to show you that harmful application is there. At the time, it is going to inspect that file only, and like show you that your system is risk free, right? But if any harmful file is there, at the time that antivirus is going to show you some recommendation to clear that file. Maybe any harmful file is there, any malicious file is there, and it's up to you. You can delete that file completely. If you delete that file completely at the time, that MP4 file and that exe file both will be deleted. But you have another option to allow that file for that time, right? It's up to you. So this is the fundamental of system firewall, how antivirus actually works. So here in our course, we are not going to talk about the system firewall, because system firewall is for a single system. If in your infra, if we talk about in your infra there are like 500 users, so 500 antivirus should be there in their systems, right? But we are talking about network firewall. We are talking about network firewalls. So any idea what is network firewall? We talked about this. Any idea? Like, just core switch, firewall, internet. Maybe it's a server, and these are the uh, You can say users, user one, user two. So we talk about the network firewall. The network firewall is going to protect your complete infra. That antivirus is going to protect users. If two users are there, then you have to install two antiviruses. But network firewall is going to secure your complete infra. That is meant for securing that complete traffic. Maybe 500 users are there, maybe 5K users are there in the back end of that firewall, but that firewall is going to like protect your complete infra from the outside world. If that user, again, that user is accessing the torrent and like downloading any movie, you can say, is going to downloading any movie. So at the time before their antivirus will act, that firewall is going to act. The user accessing the BitTorrent and downloading the movie, the return traffic is coming to the firewall. Firewall is going to inspect the traffic, right? It is going to check what type of traffic is coming from the outside to the inside. It is going to check, and here it will check that MP4 file, and it will see like there is one .exe file is also there. At the time, it is going to block that traffic because firewall knows this exe file is harmful. So it is going to block that traffic, that return request where that video is there. So it is going to block that traffic here at the outside interface. It is not going to allow that traffic to come inside because that traffic is containing some malicious information, that malicious.exe file. So it is going to block that traffic. Okay. This is the fundamental of network firewall. Any doubt? Any queries? Let me know if you have any queries, guys. Am I clear, guys? Okay, let's move further. So we talked about types of firewall, and the firstly, what is firewall, then types of firewall. Let's talk about why to choose Palo Alto Firewall over the different firewalls. Can anyone tell me why to choose Palo Alto Firewall? Because there are multiple firewalls available in the market. Anything, if you know anything about the Palo Alto Firewall, the advanced feature set, anything, if you have anything in your mind, you can see here. Why to choose Palo Alto Firewall? Because there are multiple firewalls. There are, like, if you talk about Cyberom is there, Checkpoint is there, FortiGate Firewall is there, Cisco Asa is also there, and Juniper SRX. Like multiple firewalls are there in the market, which is, I'm talking about the network firewalls only. Okay. So there are multiple firewalls available in the market. Why to choose Palo Alto Firewall over the different firewalls? Any idea? Okay. So Palo Alto was the first firewall which called as NGFW. We talk about NGFW, right? next generation firewall. So Palo Alto Firewall is the first firewall which called as NGFW, next generation firewall. Why? Because it comes with advanced feature set. It comes with advanced feature set such as app ID, content ID, URL filtering, uh, user ID, monitoring. There are like n numbers of feature. So Palo Alto comes with the advanced feature set in a single box. That's why it is named as the NGFW earlier, right? Palo Alto is the leader in the network's firewall segment as per the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Right? If we talk about different firewalls, CyberArm, Checkpoint, FortiGate, ASA, or SRX, and maybe there are a number of firewalls are also there. So the feature set which is there in the Palo Alto firewalls are not available in other firewalls. If you talk about the app ID is the like advanced feature set. We can filter the traffic based on the application. Its name is implies its information. App ID, app identification, right? So the feature set which is there in the Palo Alto firewall is not available in different firewalls, in other firewalls. And apart from that, these feature set works smoothly fine. Okay. We can utilize multiple features to filter the traffic, and those features are combined in a single hardware box. All the features are combined in a single hardware box. We don't need to procure any other device. We just need to procure the license, and we need to install that license in the firewall. And that time, that feature is going to act as per our requirement in a single box. Let me open that PPT. Just give me a second, guys. Hey guys, I'm back. Let's talk about the certification in the Palo Alto course. So if you're going to start the Palo Alto course, so there are 3 different levels: entry, administrator, and engineer, right? So for entry level, PCCET is a certification which comes the basic information of the Palo Alto. If you know about the basic information, you can opt for the PCCET certification. Like if you want to work as L1 engineer, at the time that certification is going to work. If you want to work as administrator, the person who is going to manage the firewall for a local or for a single infra, and you are sitting in an infra where like you have a single firewalls and you have to manage all the devices, like you are the single person who is going to manage the router, switches, servers, firewalls. That kind of a profile is known as the administrative profile. So at the time you can opt for that PCNSE certification. This is for administration. And if you talk about the higher level, there is the PCNSE, PCCSE, and PCSAE. So here in our course, we are going to cover that PCNSE. In that, complete PCCET is covered, and around 70 to 75% of PCNSE is also covered. Because in the administrator level, almost you can say 80% we can cover here in the PCNSE, but 20% is the theoretical part which you have to cover by yourself. We'll provide you the PDF. The theoretical part you have to cover for the PCNSE. Okay, so we are going to cover that PCNSE certification. Certification is not covered, that complete course of that PCNSE. And apart from that, PCCSE is also there. Prisma Certified Cloud Security Engineer. If you want to move to the cloud, then at the time you have to opt for this PCCSE certification and PCSAE certification, Palo Alto Network Certified Security Automation Engineer. If you want to move to the automation sector, at the time PCSAE is required. Okay. So we are going to cover PCNSE certification, each and everything about the PCNSE, like the initial to the advanced level of the firewall, like how we can configure the firewall, types of firewall, feature set of firewall, each and everything, security policies, like the complete stuff we are going to cover here in this course. Okay, but apart from that, levels are also there, like entry level, administrator level. It's up to you, like you are doing the course for PCNSE, and you want to do the certification for entry level, that PCCET, you can do that. If you want to opt that administrator certificate, you can opt for PCNSE certification. Okay, but we are going to cover the complete course here of PCNSE, Palo Alto Certified Network Security Engineer. Okay, Any queries about the certification part? Guys, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, great. So this is the levels of the Palo Alto. You can opt any level like entry level, administrator level, or engineer level. It's up to you. But we are going to cover that PCNSE part, the complete set of PCNSE. In that, PCCET is 100% cover, and around 80% of PCNSE is covered. Remaining 20% is the theoretical part, which you can cover by yourself. No issues in that. But you can say like both the levels, entry administrator is covered in our course, which is the engineer level, PCNSE. Okay. Let's move to the yeah. So we are here. Why to choose Palo Alto Firewall over the different firewall? As the Palo Alto Firewall comes with the advanced feature set, right? This is the main reason to choose Palo Alto Firewall. The UI of the Palo Alto Firewall is much simple than other firewall. You can do anything with the traffic which is coming from the inside and which is coming from the outside. You can do anything for that traffic. You can configure any policy. I'll show you all the things when we will go jump into the lab. I'll show you all the things, how we can manipulate the traffic, how we can filter the traffic, how we can configure the security policies. This is the modules. We talked about all the modules from 1 to 16, the official module, right? Module 1 to 16, which we are going to cover here. Let's talk about the back to the firewall. So if you talk about the feature set, which is their app ID, content ID, URL filtering, user ID, and monitoring, right? These are the bundle in a single hardware box. But earlier, if you talk about it's the firewall, which is there before Palo Alto. So how actually they works? Have you heard the term UTM? Any idea about the UTM? Anything about UTM? UTM basically stands for Unified Threat Management. UTM is like before the Palo Alto Firewall, like not before, you can say after 2 or 3 years when the Palo Alto launched in the market, after launching of the Palo Alto Firewall, still UTM is there for 2 to 3 years. So what is UTM actually is? Any idea?
No, sir.
We talked about Palo Alto comes with all the feature in a single hardware box, in a single box. All the feature set is bundled. But before that, how we filter the traffic? Like you place the router, in your infra, and you configure app ID, content ID, or oh, sorry, it's not app ID, the ACLs, netting, and routing, and you can easily reach to the internet. But at the time, if you have to filter the traffic, so you need to use some other engines. You need to use some other devices to filter the traffic. So UTM is basically unified threat management. It's also a bundle of like multiple features with like different engines. Like if you have to filter the application, then you have to use the app ID. You have to filter the URL, then you have to use the URL filtering engine here. These are not the license. These are the different hardware boxes. We have to use all the hardware boxes to filter the traffic as per our requirement in the UTM, not in the Palo Alto Firewall. Like content ID filtering, if we talk about content ID filtering, we have to use a different box. For user ID, we have to use a different box. Like in this manner, like for antivirus filtering, we have to use a different box. So UTM is there where we have to like bundle different hardwares in a series to filter the traffic. When your request coming from the inside, you initiated a request to access internet, right? That request is going to hit the first engine first, the app ID, then app ID is going to filter the traffic as per the configuration you have done on the app ID engine. Then it is moving to the URL filtering, then content ID, then user ID, then antivirus engine. So in this sequence, the traffic is moving. Let's suppose in the app ID, it took around 1 minute or 1 second. In URL filtering, it is taking 1 second. In the same manner, like for filtering the app ID engine took 1 second, URL filtering took 1 second, content ID took 1 second. So in this manner, the traffic, when traffic passed through that engines, it is going to utilize 6 seconds, right? Because the traffic have to pass with all the engines one by one. And in that engine, the traffic is going to be filtered as per the configuration we have done on that engine. So from the initial phase, from the app ID to the, like when the traffic is completely filtered, it took around 6 seconds to pass. So it obviously like creating the latency in the network, right? Traffic is coming, hitting the UTM, and UTM is going to act on that traffic one by one using the engines, using the firewall engines, and it is taking around 6 seconds to move from that UTM. But this was the earlier segment where the UTM is used, and we have to like procure different security engines. We have to bundle all the security engines. We have to bundle all the security engines. Whenever the traffic initiated from the inside, it is going to be filtered from all the security engines, and then it is going to be allowed. And in that filtering or in that inspection, that UTM is taking 6 seconds to filter the traffic, right? So 6 seconds is like, it is going to create a very high latency in the network. Again, when the request coming, that trend request is coming, it is also going to be inspected from one by one from all the security engines. Right? So how much time, like if I'm accessing, for example, facebook.com, it took 6 seconds to pass through that UTM and 6 seconds for the return request. At the time that request, that my request for the facebook.com is going to be, you can say, very lengthy, right? Guys, if you're not
अरे छाता वहाँ है, छाता तो उनके वहाँ है यार, दूध लाना था।
Can someone mute the audio? I mean, someone. I
Yeah,
can hear background noise.
I muted. No issues. I muted that person. So 6-second time taken to pass the packet, while Palo Alto can perform all these tasks in a single shot using SP3 architecture. Like the UTM, the traffic took 6 seconds to pass all the security engines, right? We are not going to talk about the UTM. We're just taking the fundamental of UTM. Okay, what is the use of UTM and how UTM actually works, and we'll take the reference from the UTM and then we'll check how Palo Alto actually works. So here in the UTM, traffic took around 6 seconds to pass through all the security engines, because all the security engines, you can say, a different hardware box. We bundled different hardware boxes in a single chassis kind of thing. Okay, and when the request coming from the inside, it is going to filter, it is going to be inspected with all the security engines. So that's why it is taking this much of time for inspection, 6 seconds. But if we talk about the Palo Alto firewall,
Hi, Neeraj. Neeraj. Hello.
hello.
Yeah, good morning, Neeraj Subhash.
Yeah, hi Subhash, actually Ravi this side. I'm using Neeraj's ID.
Okay,
Yes,
okay, that's now started. Hello.
No, we started at 9.
Very nice. So,
Yeah, I think time is already shared with you. Mhm. No issues, because just is the recording session.
Hi, Ravi.
Yep.
Can I have a small query? Can you please go to previous window which you have said, like UTM thing? There are multiple. You said multiple zones, no? In that before one, huh? Yeah, this one.
Mhm.
So UTM is a device where app ID, URL filter, content ID, and user ID, all these are available, right? And when traffic comes, it has to pass through all the details. Okay, it will match up with all the details. Then it will filter with all like app ID, URL filter, and content ID. These all right, no? You mean to say it's a one chassis, right?
UTM
No.
UTM is basically a complete set of set for all the security equipments bundled in a single box, you can say.
Okay, so yeah, that means it's a UTM is a device where app ID, URL filter, content ID, user ID, and AV. All these 5 things are there available in a single box, right? Do you mean this?
No, it's not a single box. We are just taking the reference. It's not a single box. These are different security engines, right? We are mapping different security engines, like and we are that security engines will act a single box, but we have to procure all the security engines like differently. It's as per our requirement. Like if I want to procure that app ID, I can, and if I don't want to procure URL filtering, it's up to me, right? So the security engines which I procured will be mapped here in the UTM, and when the traffic initiates from the inside, it will be inspected on that engine which is there in the UTM. Getting my point?
Okay, I got. Now these all are separate devices, like app ID, URL filter, content ID. These are the different devices, but it will be mapped to
Single
UTM.
box, yeah. UTM is a box
single box.
where all the security engines, you have to procure that engine. Like I want to use, you can say not engine, you can say the license. I have to procure the license for URL filtering, right? I have to procure the license for app ID. But all the feature which is there, like app ID, URL filtering, all the feature is going to act as a separate box, right? First, the traffic is coming from the app, like from the inside interface, hitting the app ID. Then app ID is going to inspect the traffic. After filtering from the app ID, the traffic is moving from app ID to URL filtering. Then URL filtering is going to inspect the traffic. Then from URL filtering to content ID, from content ID to user ID. That's why it is going to take this much of time. All the engines are going to act separately.
Okay, but individually we have to purchase the license, you meant to say.
Right.
Okay, great. I understood. I got. Thanks a lot, Ravi.
No issues. So, but if you talk about the Palo Alto Firewall actually works on SP3 architecture. Any idea about SP3 architecture? SP3 stands for single pass parallel processing. Architecture. Any idea about what is single pass parallel processing in the Palo Alto Firewall? After using this process, SP3 architecture, Palo Alto took the advantage over the UTM because all the things is already there in app ID, URL filtering, like you can procure the engine and you can utilize that engine as per your requirement. But like we use SP3 architecture in the Palo Alto, and obviously it is coming some advanced feature set. It is one of the advanced feature set. Using that SP3 architecture, using this single processing hardware, the Palo Alto took advantage over the UTM. Any idea about SP3 architecture, single pass parallel processing, or single processing hardware? Anything, any knowledge? Okay. So Palo Alto works on a single processing hardware, which is known as SP3 architecture, right? Single pass parallel processing, you can say, or single processing hardware. It means all the tasks performed simultaneously. Like here, if we talk about UTM, so traffic is like filtering one by one. The inspection of the engine is taking time. Like first the traffic is inspected by the app ID, then URL filtering, then content, and so on, right? But if you talk about Palo Alto Firewall, it works on the SP3 architecture. We'll take a reference for that. We don't need to procure different like engines. Already all the security engines are there in the Palo Alto Firewall. If you talk about app ID, content ID, URL filtering, user ID, or let's suppose antivirus, because there are multiple security engines are also there, threat prevention. Just for the reference, we are taking this much only, okay? So if we talk about the Palo Alto Firewall, all the security engines are also there. Like in the UTM, we can procure different security engines, but here in the Palo Alto Firewall, all the security engines are by default here in a single hardware box. We don't need to procure. We just need to procure the license. Already that feature is there in that box. We need to procure the license only. We'll talk about the licensing part also. What type of licenses are there in the Palo Alto? Okay, but for the time being, let's suppose you have procured the complete set of licenses where all the features are enabled. That feature is already there. You just need to procure the license, and then that feature will be enabled for you. But if you don't have the license, like majority of the feature is already there without the license. But for some features, we have to procure the license. Otherwise, that feature is not going to be act as it is, as its feature. So app ID, content ID, we are assuming that we procure the complete bundle, the complete set of licenses. Now, how Palo Alto is going to act for the traffic? Here in the UTM, the traffic inspection took around 6 seconds to pass through all the security engines. But here, when the request coming from the inside, just for the reference, when the request coming from the inside, it is going to create, like you can say, it's going to create a copy for that traffic. How much copies are there? 5 copies are there, right? It's going to create a copy, and it is going to send that copy to all the security engines. And all the security engines will act on that traffic in a single shot. Means in a single second, your traffic is inspected from all the security engines. The traffic is coming from the inside. This is for the reference. Actually, it doesn't work as like it is not sharing the copy. I'm just showing you some visualization of the Palo Alto, how actually Palo Alto works in the backend. Okay, so all the security engines will act on that traffic in a single go. It is not going to filter move from one security engines to other security engine. All the security engines will act in a single go. In a single second, your traffic will be filtered and move out. If you allowed the traffic, it will be move out. The UTM, it took around 6 seconds to pass from all the security engines, but here in the Palo Alto firewall, it took around 1 second to pass all the security engines inspection. Getting my point?
Yeah, right.
So all the security engines will act on the traffic in a single shot, like that app ID, content ID, URL filtering, user ID, or antivirus, maybe threat prevention is there, any other engine is there. All the engines will act on that traffic in a single shot. Means they are not going to take that traffic from other engines. They will act directly on the traffic. And if you allowed that traffic will be moved out in a single second. Same for return traffic. Same for return traffic. When the request coming from the server side, all the security engine is going to act in a single go. And again, it is going to take 1 second. We are assuming 1 second, right? So it took 2 seconds only for the user to receive the requested page, requested information. For example, I'm accessing facebook.com. The traffic initiated from my system, hitting the Palo Alto firewall. All the security engines will act on that request, and it will check the user is trying to access facebook.com. It took 1 second to filter the traffic and allowed the traffic. When the return request coming from the Facebook server, the requested page which I'm tried to log in, Palo Alto is again going to act on that return traffic. It is going to inspect the traffic, whether that traffic is containing any malicious file or any vulnerable file. So it is going to act on that traffic again, and it is going to take 1 second again. So 1 and 1 means 2 seconds. It took from my user request, initiated request, to the return request. So it took 2 seconds only. So here in the UTM, it took around 6 seconds here in the Palo Alto, it took around, in 6 seconds here in the UTM, 2 seconds here in the Palo Alto. So obviously, where the user experience will be good, in the UTM or in the Palo Alto?
In Palo Alto, it is taking only 2 seconds instead of 6 seconds in UTM.
Exactly. That's why Palo Alto overcome this UTM. Earlier, before Palo Alto, when the Palo Alto is not there in the market, at the time, people relies on the UTM because there is the monopoly of UTM. We have to filter the traffic because we have to secure the infra, right? And for that, we have to procure multiple security engines, and they are going to take time for filtering. User experience were very bad at the time. Maybe like you have procured multiple security engines and one of the security engine is not acting as you can say as per the feature. It is not acting as per the feature. User ID is not working properly. At that time, user ID is not going to filter the traffic. But here in the Palo Alto, all the traffic will be monitored, inspected by all the security engines, and those engines works like smoothly fine. Now, if you talk about the configuration part, in the UTM, configuration was very difficult. Like complex configuration is there. You have to configure app ID, URL filtering, and then content ID, all the things you have to configure, obviously, because they are different security engines. And like we have to do multiple configuration. But if you talk about the Palo Alto firewall, I'll show you the configuration is very simple. The concept should be in your mind. The configuration part will be very smooth, very simple. There are both the option in the Palo Alto firewall also. Like you can configure the Palo Alto firewall using CLI or using GUI. CLI and GUI. It's up to you. You can use the command line if you want to see the black screen. You want to be a hacker. So at the time you are going to use the CLI. But the Palo Alto's GUI is like enough mature. You don't need to move to the CLI unless it is required. We'll check the GUI of the Palo Alto. Okay. In the initial configuration, we'll check all these things. Okay. Any doubt, any queries till this point? Okay, I'm assuming all the things is clear. These are the basics. We are not covering Palo Alto's topic. We'll start that topic, but we are covering the basic fundamentals of firewalls. These topics should be in your mind because, like maybe in the interview, they can ask you the Palo Alto, why the Palo Alto is required, because there are multiple firewalls. So these are the basic things. These are not the part of the module. We have not started the module yet. The course will be going to start, but these are the basic topics of the firewall. If you are coming from the routing switching background, or if you are coming from the server background, you don't know about the firewalls at the time, that knowledge going to help you. Like if I'm moving from one domain to other domain, at the time, I should have the basic fundamental of that domain, right? So these are the basic fundamental. If you are having any queries, you can raise the question, or if you have any doubt, you can easily ask to me. Don't hesitate, please. Okay. Otherwise, if the fundamental is not clear at the time, you are going to be stuck somewhere. Okay, guys?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So again, on the starting page here, this is the basic network, right? One server is there, the two users are there, one core switch is there, and we are like very conscious user, so we place the firewall, not the router here, and that firewall is segregating the LAN and WAN network, right? I'll put the LAN and WAN here. It's my LAN side. It's my WAN side. So that firewall is segregating the LAN network and the WAN network, right? So like in the router, if we talk about the router we have to configure some three, or not three, only two for the internet access. Only two basic features. The first one is the netting. The second one is the routing. ACL is to filter the traffic if we want to filter the traffic, right? But here in the Palo Alto firewall, if you talk about the Palo Alto firewall, have you heard the term zone-based firewall? Any idea about
Yes.
zone-based firewall?
Yeah.
What is zone-based firewall? Anything about zone-based firewall?
There will be two zone. One is a trust zone and untrust zone. Like so, whenever we need to communication from untrust to trust, we need a separate policy for all.
Okay, great. Anyone? We move from server from here to DMZ. Let's take it as access switches. Now the scenario is a bit different, right? Earlier the scenario was very simple. Now a scenario is a bit different. We moved that server from the inside network to DMZ. So zone-based firewall. But let's talk about the zone-based firewall. Palo Alto is a zone-based firewall. What is mean as zone, right? Which means we have to create zone such as LAN as trust zone, WAN as untrust zone, right? And DMZ maybe server zone. Here in the Palo Alto firewall, we have to create zone. Like for the inside network, the LAN zone, for the outside network as the WAN zone, and for the server side as the DMZ zone. Zone, the name for zone, we can use any name. Its nomenclature could be anything. You can utilize any name. Like for the inside network, you can use LAN or inside network, LAN, inside network, trust network, whatever. कुछ भी आप ले सकते हो उसमें. It's up to you. Like the name of zone, it's up to you. You can utilize LAN, inside, trust. It's up to you. But you have to map the interface to a zone. Like I configured the inside zone as LAN. Okay, I given it name as LAN, and for the outside I use WAN, the name as WAN, or maybe I can use the untrust or outside, but I'm just using the WAN. Now I have to map the interface to that zone. For the LAN, the inside interface; for the WAN, the outside interface. And for DMZ, for the server is there in the back end of that, right? For this interface, I have to map that interface into DMZ. Now they all are in different zones, right? They all are in different zones. The inside interface is on the LAN, the server interface is in the DMZ, and the outside interface in the WAN zone, right? Now they all are in different zones. If I want to communicate between two different zones here in the Palo Alto firewalls, so we have to create a security policies. Are you getting my point? We just created the zone here in the Palo Alto Firewall. If you done the routing, if you done the netting, after doing that routing and netting, your traffic is not going to be passed through the firewall because it is not the router. It can perform the functionality of router, but this firewall is meant to secure your infra. How it is going to secure? Using these features. Like in the router, if you've done the routing and you've done the netting, you can easily access the internet. But here in the firewall, if you've done the routing and you've done the netting, still you cannot access the internet. Now you have to create zones. Zones could be anything, right? The name could be anything. Then you have to map the interface to the particular zone. The name should be something which can identify, like I'm using LAN zone for the inside network. For the outside network, I'm using the WAN zone. It means it is showing that interface is the part of outside network, right? And that interface is the part of servers where the servers are connected. Now, they all are three different zones. If I want to allow the traffic from the LAN to WAN, I already done the routing and netting. I'm assuming I already done the routing and netting. Okay. But apart from that, we have to create zones first. And based on zones, we have to create the security policy. Okay.
நான் மறந்து ரொம்ப நாள் ஆச்சு மறந்து கோணமானியா இருக்கு பரவாயில்லையா
So hello Ravi.
கோவல எனக்கு நேரம் போட வராது.
Ravi, so we must create routing and netting first. Then we have to put the interface into zone. After that, we have to apply the policies. Am I right?
No, sequence could be anything. It's not like you have to configure the routing first, netting second, zones. You can configure anything. Like, firstly, you have to create the zones. It's up to you. You can configure the routing part also. You can configure the netting part also. But zones should be required. So we can assume we have to create the zones first.
Okay, so might be sequence anything, but these all are must and should required.
Right. For like I'm talking about the basic internet access, right? Like router. In the router, we have to perform the routing and netting only for the internet access. After the routing and netting, I'm assuming IP is already given to the interfaces, and after that, routing and netting is required, and then your LAN network easily access the internet, right? In the routing. Am I clear?
Right.
Am I right? I'm not sure. Like routing and
So,
netting. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Routing and netting required. So I thought, let me clarify.
Okay. So same here. If you talk about the router, and we are just taking the reference of the router here in the Palo Alto Firewall. So routing and netting is required. It is one of the required thing for the internet access, right? But apart from that, we have to create zones. We have to map the interface into a specific zone, whether it is LAN, WAN, or DMZ, right? I'll show you that after seeing actually the lab part. It will be clear to you. But the concept should be in your mind. Why the zone is there and what is the use of zones, right? So we have to map the interface to a specific zone, right? Now I'm assuming I have configured the IP addresses on the interfaces, right? And created the zones like LAN for inside, WAN for outside, and DMZ for the server. Simple. Now, if I want to allow the traffic from LAN to WAN, not LAN to DMZ, LAN to WAN. LAN to WAN. There are multiple scenarios. LAN to WAN, LAN to DMZ, right? WAN to LAN. three different scenarios, right? LAN to WAN, LAN to DMZ, WAN to LAN, or maybe WAN to DMZ. These kind of scenarios could be there. Now, for all these things, we need to configure the security policy for anything, for from any zone to any zone. If I want to allow the traffic, I have to configure the security policy. Have you known about the Cisco ASA's like basic fundamental? Any idea about Cisco ASA?
Cisco ASA don't have, but this one Fortinet have little bit idea.
Okay, we are taking just the reference from Cisco ASA, nothing more than that. So if you talk about the Cisco ASA, right? So in the Cisco ASA, if you configure that interface, the inside interface as like basically that Cisco ASA works on the security levels, right? We have to assign the security level to the interface. Let's suppose I'm assigning the security level 100 to the inside interface, right? And 0 to outside. The security level could be from 0 to 100. 0 means trustworthy. Oh, sorry, 100 means trustworthy. 0 means untrusted. So obviously I'm putting 100 for the inside network, right? Because that is trusted network. So in the Cisco ASA, there is a like default feature. If you configure the security level as 100 to any interface, not only for the inside, for any interface, you configure the security level as 100. And if the other interface is having a security level less than that 100, maybe 90, 80, or 0, it could be anything, but not the 100, not the same level, less than 100. So from the higher security level to the lower security level, traffic is allowed by default. You don't need to configure anything. Getting my point? From the higher security level to the lower security level, traffic is allowed by default. You can assume like if you are using like counting from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 100 is there, right? 100 is on the top, and the second interface is on 0. So from top, from upside to the downside, traffic is allowed. You can throw the stone from upside to the downside directly, but you cannot throw the stone directly on the bottom to the upside of the uphill of the mountain. So from higher security level, from security level 100 to security level 0, traffic is allowed by default. We don't need to configure the policy, or we don't need to configure anything. But if we talk about the traffic who is coming from the traffic 0 to the traffic to the security level 100, that traffic is not going to work. That is blocked by default. Understood? This is the concept of a Cisco ASA, not the Palo Alto. We are taking the reference of that. Am I clear?
Yeah, so in interface 100 to 0, traffic will be flowing from 100 to 0. It won't be flowing from 0 to 100. This is the by default rule, right? No?
Yeah, if the traffic is flowing from 0 to 100, that will be blocked. And these are the default feature of the Cisco ASA.
Higher to lower, it will be default. Traffic will flow.
Allowed.
But lower to higher, it will not flow.
Right.
Okay, this is the default
Cisco
in Cisco ASA.
ASA.
Right,
Higher
great.
to lower, allowed. Okay. And lower to higher, blocked. Okay. But here, if we talk about the Palo Alto, the concept is clear. The Cisco ASA, how the Cisco ASA actually works.
Right. Great.
But here in the Palo Alto, there is no concept for security levels. Okay. Zone-based concept is there. In the Cisco SA, we have to configure the zone. We have to give it a name like LAN or WAN, right? Same in that manner. We have to configure the zone, the name to that interface, and we have to map that interface to the specific zone. Now, there is no concept for the security levels. If you configure the interface as LAN, you map that interface in the LAN zone, the outside interface in the WAN zone, the traffic is not going to work because there is no concept for security levels. For the communication from any zone to any zone. Hello? Am I audible, guys?
Yeah. So here, any zone to any zone, there will not be like policy like 100 to 0, lower to higher. This won't be there. This concept won't be there. You mean to say, right?
Right. There is no concept for security levels. We have to configure the security policy for any interzone traffic. Interzone means that between two different zones. Interzone and intrazone. The concept should be in your mind, right? I'm assuming it is clear to you because already in the CCNA you have covered these topics, right? Interzone and intrazone. Oh, sorry, inter traffic and intra traffic. Intra traffic means within the same, you can say, domain. Like if I am configuring both the interfaces of this core switch in a single VLAN, for example, default VLAN 1, and giving the IP as 10.1 to this user, 10.2 to this user, at that time, they both can easily communicate, right? I'm talking about the routing switching. Basic routing
Yeah,
switching.
in a single VLAN can talk each other. You mean to say, right?
Right. If you talk about like I'm not talking this, it's a switch, no normal switch. You can
Right.
say L2 switch, and both the interfaces are in a single VLAN. VLAN 1 default VLAN, right? And we are giving the IP. We are using the IP address as 10.1 for the user 1, 10.2 for the user 2. They can easily communicate without any configuration, without any routing, without any netting, right? They can easily communicate because they are the part of a single domain. They are the part of a single VLAN, right? Have you done this kind of lab in CCNA?
Yeah.
Routing switching?
Yeah. Right. A single VLAN will talk to each other. For that, we are keeping in place single VLAN.
Right. Now the concept is for like intrazone traffic. This is intra traffic, intra VLAN traffic, right? From
Right.
in a single VLAN from one user to other user, you can easily communicate. But if there is a user, there is one more user who is sitting in VLAN 10. They are the part of VLAN 1, and this is the user of VLAN 10, and it is having the IP of 20.1. We can take the example as 20.1. This user is having the IP as 20.1. Whether they like, I'm not sure. Like, you can say me, you can guide me here. A user can communicate from user 1 can communicate with this user or not? Is it possible? We
It's
are
not
just
possible because it
Yeah.
is in different VLAN.
Right. Exactly. The same manner. Earlier, the user 1 can communicate with user 2 because both are the part of a single VLAN, same VLAN, VLAN 1. Right. Now we configured a different VLAN, VLAN 20 or 10 also here in these on the switch, and we mapped one of the interface to that VLAN and given the IP as 20.1. The users can communicate. The same VLAN users can communicate easily. But for communicating to a user who is sitting in a different VLAN, it's not possible because it is the part part of inter-VLAN traffic between two different VLAN traffic, right? Interzone means inter-VLAN or intra-VLAN. The traffic users 1 to user 2 is the intra-VLAN traffic within the same VLAN. But the traffic which is initiated from the user 1 to a different VLAN's user, it is the traffic of inter-VLAN, different VLAN traffic, right?
Right.
In the same way, intrazone and interzone. Intrazone communication and intrazone communication. So intrazone communication between, it means the same zone communication. If like there is one more port is there on the Palo Alto firewall, I map that port also in the LAN zone, right? Means now there are two ports which are the part of LAN zone, and there is like multiple users are connected also on that port. Now the traffic from one interface to other interface is allowed by default because that is the traffic of intrazone. Getting my point? This is the part of a same zone. So traffic is allowed by default. But if we talk about the traffic from LAN to WAN, this traffic, LAN to WAN, now the traffic is like LAN is a different zone, WAN is a different zone. For interzone communication, we have to configure the security policy for all the interzone communication from LAN to WAN, from LAN to DMZ, from WAN to LAN. It is not assuming WAN is my outside network or hackers could be there. WAN is just a name. Palo Alto doesn't know which interface is connected with the internet. Palo Alto doesn't know this. We have to configure the security policies. Palo Alto will block all the traffic by default. It is not going to allow any traffic from any zone to any zone. Only intra-zone communication is allowed. Means within the same zone traffic is allowed, but between two different zones, we have to configure the security policy from LAN to WAN, from LAN to DMZ, or from WAN to LAN. We have to configure a security policy. Understood?
So simple way we can say it is a policy-based firewall, right? No.
Yeah, you can say policy-based firewall also. There is a term for this policy-based firewall, but actually in like other firewalls, like we took the example of Cisco Asa, where this concept is not working because from higher security level to lower security level, traffic is allowed by default. But here in the Palo Alto, nothing is allowed by default. We have to configure a security policy for interzone traffic, for LAN to WAN traffic maybe, or from LAN to DMZ, or WAN to LAN. We have to configure the security policy for that. Am I clear, guys?
Without any policy.
Come again?
Intra-zone communication is possible without any policy. This is the default rule in.
Right, because it's trustworthy, right? I can communicate in like obviously the person who is sitting in a zone can communicate with the person who is sitting in the same zone, right? It like we can take an example of a building where like 3 floors are there. From one floor to second floor, I can easily move because this is the part of a single building. But for a different person who is sitting in a different building and which is there or not, maybe in a different geolocation, I cannot communicate with him directly. We have to like take the transport in between. So transport is security policy. That transport is security policy from different zone communication. Two different zone communication, we have to configure security policy, but intra-zone traffic is allowed by default. Okay.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
So security policies should be configured to communicate between different zones. And intra-zone is allowed, right? But if we talk about, there is if you configure this, if you have known the term that policy based forwarding in the routing switching, have you done this? Policy based forwarding, PBF.
Yeah, so we have to create route policy.
Yeah, so PBF means you are configuring some policy for forwarding, right? So if PBF is configured, it means it is going to override the security policy. PBF is having the high priority. Okay.
Right.
So like in routing switching, also in security, everything, like if you configure the PBF is having the higher priority. So if PBF is there, it is going to override the security policy. It is not going to check the security policy. It is, if PBF is there, it will it will utilize that PBF directly and override the security policy and process the traffic. Okay. Let me know if you have any doubt till this point. Guys, any doubt? Let's take 10 minutes break, then we'll start again. We'll jump into the lab, okay? We'll do the configuration part.